My name is Genevieve Klein. I work as a customer success manager. I particularly handle a lot of our appraisal customers and come from an appraisal related background. So I spend a lot of time reading ANSI. So feel free to throw in any questions that you think of during this, whether they're um, very specific or very broad. Will be good to have that. Tom and Amber are here. They'll be helping answer questions and send out some links. We'll stay here for just a moment so that you guys have a chance to take a look at this QR code. This will sign you up if you don't have an account already and automatically affiliate you to MLS listing. With CubiCasa, that'll get you a little bit of a discount of 10% just by being affiliated to MLS listing, and that's on any paid products. And then once we start going through here, we'll talk about what is CubiCasa, how does it work, and what are the typical ways that we see appraisers using it in particular. And use that Q&A to ask any questions like was said, and we'll keep, if there's any questions at the end, we'll go through anything that's outstanding. All right, let's get going. So first, what is CubiCasa? So we are an app, meaning that you can go onto the Google Play or Apple Store and download it straight to your device. That could be on an actual Apple phone or on an Android. That also includes iPads and tablets. That's a really common question we hear from appraisers in particular, since a lot of the time we're doing our appraisal software or using our appraisal software on tablets to take photos and fill out forms. Either way works for us. There's some basic requirements that your device has to meet around things like having a depth sensor and being on a minimum operating system, but it's pretty generous. For the most part, if you're replacing your phone, on occasion, you're probably going to have a device that's eligible to be used with CubiCasa. Now, the beauty of CubiCasa is that you don't need anything else. There's no specialty hardware. You don't have to have something you attach to your phone. You don't need like a specialized camera. None of that applies. And it's not hard to use. That's really our big goal whenever we're talking about CubiCasa, is making sure that it's really easy to use and accurate. We'll talk about that part a little bit more later. But the other good thing that's about the application is that we are a technology-driven app, and that means anytime stuff's improving, we're improving with it. If your phone gets better equipment as time goes on, we improve with that. If the sensors in your phone get better, we improve with that, right? So it's really nice that you'll kind of have a naturally, consistently improving option, even minus whatever we do to actively improve our tech. But I want to show you kind of what's actually happening here. So this video, I'm going to pause it real quick after we start. This is going to be at 2x speed, so this is not the real speed. We're going a little bit faster, but I think you'll find that that's just fine for this example. What you're going to see here is on the top left, this is what you'd be seeing in your camera essentially while you're doing a scan. Down here is what your actual device is seeing, what that camera is picking up. This is the data that's used to build out the model. And then over here is the model. So as you're scanning, you are creating essentially like a 3D model with the depth information that's picked up. So you can see as the user walks through, this green line represents their walking path. The red cone here is the device direction. And that model's being created with everything that's noticed. I'll go ahead and turn that off. So you can see the user following these or the interior perimeter walls, and you can see how this model is slowly being built out. You don't have to capture every single nook and cranny perfectly because you're probably going to catch it somewhere as you walk through a room. A couple key notes are that you want that camera facing forward, not pointed at the wall. We're trying to get the entire area. The wall will be captured as just part of pointing it forward because it'll be off to the side. Something we do see a lot of the time with appraisers is that we might focus a little bit more on the wall. I think that's a history of measuring walls themselves that kind of comes to mind. Try to avoid doing that, even if it feels like the right thing to do. Another thing that's worth noting is the distance. Typically, we want to stay about 5 to 11 feet away from whatever's in front of us. So that's just about the ideal range for the technology to see out. We'll talk a little bit about like errors and things like that in a minute. You're not going to have the scan fail or not be able to get a floor plan just because you got a little too close to a wall or anything like that. But I will say, like, garages and larger spaces, just really make sure you're trying to get in there as far as you can. You don't want to have an incomplete floor plan because you weren't able to enter that space all the way. Another thing I want to call out is you can see we've got couches, furniture of all kinds. We have personal belongings. This part we didn't walk all that far into because of those personal belongings. We're still getting most of that detection. And it's totally all right if there are personal items. Garages, again, as an easy example where we tend to see a lot of personal items. That's totally all right. You don't have to have an empty, clean house. We have a lot of orders that are done on like refinances and things like that that are being lived in, including some that are very thoroughly lived in. So don't worry about that at all. But yeah, I just want you to kind of see what's happening as you're doing that scan. This is why it's really important to walk all the way in. I'd say the two biggest things to kind of keep in mind if you start thinking about doing a scan is all you have to really do is make sure you enter the space fully, ideally walking around it as much as you can, and don't point your device like at the wall or at the floor. If you don't do either of those, you're probably going to have no issues using CubiCasa to get your order. So we'll move on to our next video here. And this one is also going to show you a little bit about scanning. This one's showing our dear friend Tammy here, who is doing a scan. This is a little bit slower. This is being done filmed, so most people aren't going to walk quite so perfectly. We're going to usually have more interruptions, more like that last scan. But you'll see that she is walking parallel to the wall and that she is keeping that device forward, slightly pointed down. I like to think of it as like holding it kind of lazily. You don't want to be holding it super straight. It's okay if you do, but just have a little bit of lax in your hand and you'll kind of get the perfectly correct angle. You'll also see she is entering the room and kind of just doing a slow circle. That's the perfect behavior that we want. That's capturing everything, kind of getting all of the different angles. As you're looking at this, you'll see this blue line represents the path she walked, and then the actual red dot with the cone is where she is and what she's pointing at with the device. I want to note that right here, we're going to walk by a linen closet or a towel closet. You can see it's open, but she's not going to do anything special like turn and poke into it. For small closets, we don't need to go through that level of detail. Even if it was closed, that would be okay because we're getting all of the data of the surrounding area. So we're going to know what that area looks like overall. We're going to see the actual doors that are there. We're going to be able to figure out this is a closet and it's probably 2x4 because we have everything else, or 2x6 might be 3x6, something, whatever the size is, right? And now you see she's going into this bedroom. You'll notice she's following this right-hand wall right now, but when she comes back out, she's going to kind of get this left-hand wall more. But more importantly, I want to call out that there is a walk-in closet in here. For something that's bigger like that, we do want to make sure that we're capturing it. So you'll see that she's going to peek in and just kind of back out. And that's totally fine. It's a small space, just giving a quick peek and backing out is fine. Similarly, we're going to watch her do this little toilet area. She just kind of pops in and then comes back out. You might also notice as she's doing her scan, like when she went into that walk-in closet, and I'll rewind in a minute to show it. Sometimes she gets a warning that says too close in certain spots, where the camera is a little bit too close to a specific item. Maybe someone walks in front of frame, anything like that. It's okay if you see that warning. It doesn't mean your scan's failing. It's just trying to help make sure that you get a really good quality scan. That was a perfect example right there. We can see it again popping up. It's all right to do it. It's just to help prevent you from constantly holding it in that spot and then having a scan that's harder to be produced or not as quality as we'd like. Especially as appraisers, we want as high quality and as accurate as we can get. So much like using something like a measuring tape, there is a level of user responsibility there, but it's not super high. You don't need to do anything crazy. These things will just help you make sure that it stays that high. There are other warnings you might see, like spinning too fast or pointing too far down. If you see that, just adjust your behavior if you can. In some cases, maybe you're scanning that closet, you'll see that too close. That's okay. You don't need to do anything special. Just continue doing your scan. And you'll see she's just walking around this bed here, making sure we're getting all of the walls that we can and walking at a pretty normal pace. You don't need to go slow. Don't run. We don't want to be speeding up intentionally, but you don't have to worry about doing any kind of special speed while you're going through. Also, if you have homeowners, pets, anything like that, that's totally fine. Uh, the technology ignores personal items, it ignores people, it ignores pets. So when we're scanning a cluttered space, when we're scanning a place that has someone in it, I mean, try not to be pointing directly at them where that's all the camera can see. I like to think of it kind of like eyes. If someone's walking around a house and you put your hands directly in front of their eyes, they can't see anything, so it's going to be hard for them to know where they are. But as long as you're not doing anything like that, it's going to be just fine. Don't mind that homeowner. So then I want to talk a little bit about our GLA. Let me see if I can get this to show up correctly real quick. There we go. So I want to talk about our GLA product. As appraisers, there are specific things that you really need in order to do a floor plan, right? You can't just get like a basic listing floor plan that has interior dimensions and hope that that's enough. You've got a few more things that you have to include, and you're held to some different standards than what a real estate agent or a real estate photographer might be. That's what this GLA product is for. So the GLA product, as a note, is a $15 base cost per order. That's not including your 10% discount, so you would still get that 10% off on that $15 per order. We don't do any kind of subscription fee. You use CubiCasa on an as-needed basis. You can also use a free product we have, but if you're doing this for appraisal work, you're going to want the GLA to make sure that it has everything you need. That includes being ANSI aligned. So we extensively follow ANSI. So everything from how do we handle stairs to how are we handling walls, anything like that, low ceilings, sloped ceilings, all of that aligns to ANSI, and then some market practices kind of layered on top where ANSI might not address things. So it's going to be ANSI aligned. It's going to have exterior dimensions. You have to have that right in order to fulfill your appraisal needs. It's also good to be able to see what those dimensions are and check it. Um, you're going to have area calculations, and we'll talk a little bit about different ways you can get that. And then you're going to have some stuff you don't need. So you will have area totals in those calcs. That includes like your ANSI aligned living area, that includes your non-living area. With UAD 3.6 coming up, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, that's going to include non-standard finished living area. We also include basement finished area as its own color. So you'll notice everything's a little color coded for the GLA. Green's that like ANSI aligned finished living area, what we call the GLA. Yellow is finished basement area. Red is non-living area. Pink will be this non-standard finished living area. And then we also have ADUs that will actually automatically detect using the Fannie Mae legal definition of what is an ADU. So that's how we look for that. You can also go into our editor tool and change it. As a note, we do pre-label every room. You do have the ability to edit that as well. So there is a quick edit tool you can use on our website, and you can make a large number of changes. We also have a change request tool where if something's more extensive or you can't do it in that quick edit tool, you could write to our team and say, hey, I wasn't able to scan a room, but I have the dimensions. Could you add it in, for example? Or I need a garage added that's detached, that's a 20 by 20. You could send that into our team and we could add that for you. We also have some other items that you don't necessarily have to have. We have interior walls. We include that on every floor plan that you get from us, including the GLA. You don't have to have that for most appraisal products, but it's nice to show. and it will be there. That also means that you get to see interior and exterior ingress and egress. So you can figure out your bedroom definitions, for example, and see if you've got those two means of egress in order to meet that bedroom definition. We do also automatically detect above or below grade. If for any reason it's not detected the way you'd like or it's incorrect, you can go into our editing tool and change that as well. And then there's a few different ways that you can actually get that GLA floor plan. You can get a PDF that shows each floor with the area calculations already brought out or already placed into it for you. That's one option. A lot of our appraiser users like to use that. Download it and then just pop that into your appraisal software. It's already got everything you need. It has all that information, easy to use. If you're a little more tech savvy and you want a little bit more control, though, we do also have PNG files, so that's like a basic image file, and then a JSON file that has the calculations in it. That's like a computer readable file for those who might not be familiar with it. So you can either just take that kind of pre-made PDF, or you can take the PNG file and that JSON and kind of use those however you need. You also do have the ability in our editor tool to go in and change how something's being qualified. So not just below or above grade, but if you know, say in this case, I actually made changes to this one, but this other room is unfinished. It's like a greenhouse. You could go back in and switch this to be non-living. In this case, it was switched to be living for testing purposes. So you can make those kinds of changes within our editing tools. Before I keep going, I want to check, are there any questions that we might want to answer right now, Amber?
We did have one question come in wondering if it measures heights floor to ceiling based on the new UAD 3.6 requirements.
Great question. So we do detect ceiling height. We're not currently showing it on our appraisal reports. However, anything UAD 3.6, we know adoption isn't really that high yet, and that it's a major industry change. So we want to offer any information that we hear is being used. We're still seeing some confusion around like conditional items and things like that. So we're kind of waiting a little bit to see what's like a recurring ask and then what items you're actually going to be using as the form softwares start getting used and everyone understands kind of what's happening with it more. So that is information that exists and we have ways that you can get to it. It's not currently on that floor plan, but it's something we could add. So if you are using our GLA product, especially our GLA new version that we'll talk about on our next slide, um, feel free to give us feedback. We do look at feedback, we document it, and we will make changes, especially for something like UAD 3.6, where as much as we can, we want to help you out with that transition. Any others?
That was the only question so far.
Awesome. So, talking about UAD 3.6, let me go down here. So this says upcoming improvements, but it is actually out. So right now, if you were to download a floor plan, it would default to this style. You can use our old style. I don't think there's a really good reason to use the old style because the new one's much prettier, and it has more information. It's not really doing anything different with like ANSI aligned GLA because nothing has changed there. But there's more breakdown in essentially what was non-living area. So specifically, there is the addition of this new area type that Fannie Mae and the GSEs have introduced, which is non-standard finished living area. We've been working with Fannie Mae pretty extensively to make sure we understand what falls into that category, namely flat ceilings that are between 5 and 7 feet tall and non-contiguous spaces. So we've been working with them to make sure when we're detecting this that it is aligned to those expectations. And we do have a new color for that, but that would be areas that previously we would have considered like non-living area, like non-contiguous or those lower ceilings. We would have just marked it as non-living. There wasn't a space explicitly built out for it in the old forms. Now it falls into this new category and we have a new color for it. So like GLA or ANSI aligned finished living area has not changed at all. It's just the addition of more breakouts for the areas that aren't part of that, really. You'll also see some just general visual improvements. So if we go back up here, you'll see we don't have those lines. The colors are a little bit more saturated. Sorry. Now it's a little bit more calm, little nicer to look at. We've also made some other visual changes. We used to include dimensions around the stairs, for example. We no longer include those just because they could get really clunky, especially with things like curved staircases. And as a note, we do show the staircases on the floor plan. So if you're ever doing an order and then you're on site, you do your floor plan, you do your overall report, but then you go home to finish it, get your comps, do your actual value consideration. You could look at that floor plan and figure out, was that basement accessible from the interior via staircase, or did it only have exterior access? Things like that are items you could answer through that floor plan for your own sake, and then maybe also for your readers, right? It's typically nice to provide a little bit of extra detail so that they know what's happening too. If you add that comment in your report saying there's no interior access, they'll see it in addition to having it noted on your report. We're also adding a few new data pieces. So, kind of going to the ceiling height question, we have added some easier breakouts more aligned with what the forms should have. We only have a few form providers who are actually doing UAD 3.6 so far. So, we'll see. We might iterate on this as time and we get more learnings on what people actually experience. But these are intended to be like pretty one-to-one so that if you're filling out the floor plan related parts of the UAD 3.6 form, you can easily grab that particular data point and just pop it into your software. That's our goal here. You'll see this on that PDF if you download it. As a note too, the color scheme we use actually is directly coming from a Fannie Mae FAQ. And again, we do work with them actively on this. So maybe take a little comfort if you do use the floor plan, that the color scheme shouldn't be an issue at all. We have a lot of users or a lot of lenders and other people who have been consuming CubiCasa floor plans for years. So they shouldn't surprise anyone anyway. But even beyond that, we're actually aligning directly to specific content that Fannie Mae has released. So that might be a little comforting to hear as well, as far as getting pushback comes in. Any questions that came in while we went over that?
We did have another one come in asking, how do you scan an atrium, which is in the middle of the house? Last time I tried, and the GLA came up twice as big as public record.
Interesting. So with something like an atrium, well, let me back up a little. Any kind of outdoor area can be scanned if it has like a clear delineation. So for example, patios, porches, um, anything like that, decks, you can scan all of those, just follow that exterior perimeter like you would an interior wall, and we will include that on the floor plan. The only exception is if there's truly nothing to tell us where the edges are. So, an example of that might be like a carport that doesn't have walls. That's where we might have limitations. But typically, anything that you're doing there, we can do. We'll even show things like pools, and I'll show you an example later with a pool demonstrated. So, if you have an atrium and it's in the middle of the house, you can go in at any point, however it's accessed, if it's got a door going to it, for example. Just walk in any point. It doesn't have to be at the end. It doesn't have to be at the beginning of the scan. You would walk it just like an interior room. If it came in as living area somehow, I would guess that maybe it had some kind of finished quality, but typically it should be separated out if it's non-living area and it's not finished to the degree of the rest of the house, essentially. That should be separated out, and in this new floor plan, you'd see it probably in red, unless it had a higher level of finish and might be non-standard finished or might even be finished area, but it would be separated out kind of just like a normal room. If for any reason it did come back with like the wrong detection, you'd still be able to go into that editor tool and change it. For your specific example, I'd suggest you could reach out to our help team, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and we could take a look and actually figure out if something was done wrong or what could be causing that higher area. Any other questions?
That's it for now.
All right, fantastic. So our next item here is going to be about accuracy, so that's not a terrible transition. Um, what I want to kind of start with when we're talking about accuracy is that we know how important it is for appraisers in particular. If pretty much of everyone in the industry, the people most likely to get pushback on accuracy tends to be appraisers, just because of how that is being used and the expectations around the accuracy level. So, from our perspective, there's no point in offering something like the GLA if we're not going to be accurate enough to use. Um, in that mentality, whenever we are talking about GLA accuracy in particular, we do compare it to traditional appraisals. That's what we like to use as our gold star, most reliable source that we can compare against because nothing else out there is really held to a very consistent standard. You know, say county or assessor records, we see some counties do it wonderfully, others do very, very interesting things, like count vaulted ceilings at 2 times the space is a favorite of mine. So you see all kinds of weird things. MLS records may are trying to be as accurate as they can. Um, Real estate agents may or may not have a professional appraiser doing that floor plan historically. It might be that the house has changed too, is another thing that we'll see often in regards to like old record data. So whenever we're trying to do a review, we're trying to use appraisal data just because we can control more of when that appraisal came from, who put it in, what standard they were using. Now that I think 2021 is when Fannie Mae started requiring ANSI on any loans that they were purchasing. So nowadays, the vast majority of appraisals are being done with the ANSI Z765 standard. So we don't see very much, difference because of things like rounding, for example. So what we did in this particular study that we're showing on screen is take a look at two appraisers hand measuring the same property. We had a fair number of particular boundaries around that. So, for example, it was all within 6 months of each other. They had to be the same loan type, so we weren't comparing like an FHA loan to a conventional. We removed any cases that were known to be materially deficient. So, one appraiser went out and something was wrong, so they sent out a second. We took everything like that out so that we were getting, a high quality and consistent expectation around those two appraisers and two appraisals. And so you can see that on these, we had an average GLA variance of 3.9%. That's pretty good, especially if you look at things like public record. And that also aligns with what we typically hear in the industry. We've never had anyone like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or pretty much any official institution say this is the acceptable number, but generally it's about 5% that we practically hear is kind of that acceptable range. And that aligns pretty closely with what we're seeing between two appraisers. Something else noteworthy is that we had about 5%, just under 4.9% of orders had a significant GLA variance. So that means that it was 15% or more in this particular study. Then over here, this is two untrained homeowners scanning the same property with CubiCasa. So what we're really aiming at here is consistency and then looking at that with appraisers. And you can see that our average variance was 4%. So zero point 0.1 higher than, or zero point 0.1 worse compared to appraisers, but pretty close in line. And then we didn't have any cases of significant GLA variance, which makes a lot of sense when you think of it from a technological perspective. We have to follow very, very consistent rules. We're not going to vary very often in regards to how something is handled, right? But this is just one example of like an actual study that we've done regarding accuracy to kind of take a look at. We are also used in the industry a lot, so that might be a little bit of a reassurance. But what we really recommend for appraisers above everything else is to do your own sketch and try CubiCasa side by side. Every new sign up gets a free 2D upgrade. I would recommend using that for that GLA order. That way you can take a look, compare those exterior dimensions, and see how it compares. We often recommend doing your first scan on your own house. That lets you have a home that you really know the details of wherever you're living. As a note, we can do condos, so your own apartment's fine too. So do that, give it a shot, see how it compares. Depends on the appraiser what that level of comfort requires. We have some people who do a handful, make sure that they line up and they're comfortable. We've had other people who've done like 40 side by side and then decided that, it's reliable enough in their eyes to use. So that's what we always recommend for appraisers because you know how to sketch. You already can take the dimensions, and then you can see if that threshold's within your comfort level. Any new questions?
Is there a charge for MLS subscriber for scanning a house less than 2,500 square feet? And I did mention to them that for a 2,500 square foot house, if you opt for the free light floor plan product with the GLA report add-on, the fee is $15 before your 10% MLS discount.
Perfect. And to Amber's answer, we do have a light product that is like our free package. You can use that, but it's not going to fulfill your appraisal needs. If you're using CubiCasa for an appraisal, you need to use that GLA to get what you want. If you're ever doing work for like listings, if you do measurement reports for, say, a real estate agent, that's something where you might use that light product or one of our other paid. We've got like 3D models and all kinds of other fun stuff for listing purposes. You just don't really need that as an appraiser typically. You can find all of that on our pricing page if you do that kind of work, or maybe you have a real estate license as well. But we're primarily focusing on that GLA report here, since that's really the main thing that our appraisers care about, and it has everything you need. So, kind of talking about what you need, I mentioned that we don't have a subscription fee and that the accuracy level that makes people comfortable tends to differ. To that, part of the reason we don't have the subscription fee is because the market is so volatile. We don't want you to pay the same amount whether you're getting 100 or 5 reports in a month, right? That's not really an effective way. It doesn't reflect what you're actually getting to do. It also kind of forces you to use this on every single order, which, as much as we appreciate, you don't have to do. We have a lot of appraisers who like to use us for complex properties and not simple ones. If you've been measuring homes for 20 years, you might not want to pull out something like CubiCasa and spend that $15 before the discount to, measure a 52 by 30 uh, rectangle, right? Like it's just not that hard. You've done it enough. You know how it works. It's so fast. But when it comes to really complex properties, curved walls, angled walls, other weird things, major open to below spaces on an upper floor, any of that is often where we see even experienced appraisers start looking at using CubiCasa. This is just one example. This isn't the GLA report. This one is a listing, but you can see we have a pool over here. This person scanned the stamped patio. We've got a shed that was scanned. And you can also see it's just a curved wall house. A story I really enjoy is I talked to an appraiser once in a market that was particularly non-competitive. He didn't really have anyone else in the region, had a lot of freedom in what work he could take. And we were discussing CubiCasa specifically. And he said, oh yeah, it would be good for complex properties like ranger houses. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And he's like, I still wouldn't do it though, because if I get a house like that, I just don't take the order. So for him, it wasn't really saving the opportunity. But I've also talked to people who do particularly luxury orders, whether it's non-lender or anything else. And if you do a high number of luxury houses, it seems like you tend to get a lot more bang for your buck just because you're more likely to have complex floor plans. They're more likely to be satisfied by having a higher level of detail. That's something I've heard from a couple appraisers, especially ones that do like luxury markets, is having that extra detail makes them feel a little bit more a little bit more immune to pushback just because there's so much detail, it's harder to kind of push against it. And this is just one particular example. And I do want to note when you're scanning a property, if there's like an ADU, a shed, anything like that, you can just walk outside, scan that area, and continue on. You don't have to do anything special. Just do one continuous scan. We don't have a pause feature. It's something we'd love to have. It just doesn't really work with the tech. But you don't have to do anything special. It's okay that you go outside. Don't worry about that. And then another complex example, this one with an older version of our GLA report. You can see this would probably have been a bit of a beast to measure with all of those beautiful curved walls. This one has a really fun story connected to it from an appraiser. Uh, the appraiser in question was not confident in CubiCasa. He hadn't used it before. He knew about it. He thought about using it, but he was really hesitant to use a technology that he didn't have control over. He drove up to this house, saw it, and decided that day, I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot and see if it can do this. He did end up measuring it by hand too, just because he didn't have that confidence in the technology at the time. But he did the scan, he did his own sketch, and then he was able to compare them. And especially on a complex property like this, it's a pretty good comparison point, right? So I want to say that it was about like 1.5% discrepancy in the GLA, which for a property this complex is pretty good. And he was really happy with the results. But this is where we typically see appraisers, even the experienced ones, start seeing the potential time savings. This one did also have a second floor that is right over here. You can see the stairs. We don't have it on this slideshow just because it already takes up so much room. But you can see we've got the garage separated out. All of those difficult angles are included. All of those interior walls are still there. You can buy products that have like internal fixtures, so like toilets and stuff like that, if you ever do want to get a higher level of quality to make it look even more professional. But by no means are those needed. You'll always have what you need to meet your appraisal needs with just that GLA product. And then this is another one that we kind of wanted to call out. This is just an example with some functional obsolescence. That is over here on this upper floor. You can see there is a room that you access through a closet, through another room. Whether you would call it a maybe sitting room or what, that's definitely not the most typical room use. And while you would also be marking it in your report comments, normally you're expected to show that as well on the appraisal. I've talked to certain appraisers who say that when they are doing interior walls to demonstrate functional obsolescence, they actually like to do them to scale just because they feel like if they're adding it, they want it to be correct. And then they find that those functional obsolescence examples start taking up a lot more time. This, you don't have to worry about it. You're just going to already have that information. And we will also do things like show low ceiling areas and things like that separated out. We account for sloped ceilings following ANSI rules. All of that's accounted for, and you don't have to do anything special. You can see these two open to below. They're shown, they're represented, but they are not being calculated as part of the GLA. And this one is a sloped ceiling over here over the garage. So those are some of the uses that we typically see that are more beneficial for appraisers. Something I like to say is, as an appraiser, I always recommend if you would care about it, scan it. That's a really easy way to think of it. If you know, for example, there's a dormer window and there's two closets on each side that show the sloped ceiling, maybe open up those closets to make sure that slope is captured so we know it's dormered. That's a really easy example. A couple notes just regarding the use. You do not need Wi-Fi or internet access while you scan. You can go ahead and have those off. You can be in airplane mode. We have a safe mode in the app you can enable that will help prevent like interruptions while you scan. If you can't or if you don't have those access to Wi-Fi or internet connection, that's totally all right. You can upload it later. That's often what we see people do is they'll go out, they'll do their scans, especially for rural properties, go home and then upload them. Um, Also, if you have a property that doesn't have electricity, for example, and it's too dark, there are some tools within the app to help with those situations. For the too dark example, if it does get too dark, whether you're using an Android or an iPhone, your flashlight will automatically turn on to make sure that you've got the light you need. Another thing that I want to call out that we don't have in the slide deck and we should add is that we do have a snapshots feature. That is something that while you're doing your scan, you can take a photo. The idea was to try and help mitigate the cases where someone has to walk through the property twice for the photos and then the floor plan. This is only going to be portrait photos. We don't have the ability for you to rotate your phone and do landscape. So if you have to have landscape, for any reason, that's not going to work for you. But you just take the photos as you go, and then at the end, you can download them to your camera roll. That's just something we offer on all scans. You can also get a fancy report, but you don't need that, and it's part of a different product. But yeah, you can take your photos while you do your scan, is the main thing to know in regards to that. And then, so just to kind of summarize, what are the benefits of CubiCasa? It's fast, it's easy to use. Our average scan length really is about 5 minutes, if not less, for properties of a typical size being like a 2,500, 2,250 square foot house. So to give you an idea. Um, the app is free to download. There's no subscription fees. You can use that light floor plan just to play around with it as much as you want, and you can always upgrade later to the actual GLA product if you just want to like test out how it feels to use or see like room dimensions or something like that. For most properties, this is going to save you time. We automate the room labeling, wall placement, show stairwells. So if you're doing any kind of report that requires interior walls, that's going to save you a ton of time. If you just don't have to take that little bit of extra time for the room labels or have them kind of awkwardly placed or something. It's a really high quality look, right? Like appraisal software does the job, which is great. It's not exactly doing the job for the idea of looks or making sure everything is really fun and pretty, laid out super cleanly. It's correct, it has the information, but it doesn't look particularly nice. This is built to look nice. Our typical delivery is a 24-hour SLA, meaning that 99.9% of the time, you're going to get that floor plan back within 24 hours. The average return is closer to 13 to 17 hours. So if you don't pay for anything special, you get that. There is a 6-hour rush option. So if you ever have an appraisal you really need now, you can request that rush and you'll get it back closer to 3 hours. And then we do have 24/7 customer support. You can access our customer support through our app. So if you're actually on site doing a scan and you have a question, you can answer or ask your question right there and then. You can reach out on our website through a chatbot or through a chat bubble. And then you can also email us at help@cubicasa.com and we'll get back to you. As a note, we do have 24/7 support. So, and that support gets back to you very quickly. Our average response time is about 2 minutes. So if you are on site and you need a question now, you're not going to be waiting like an hour to get that answer either.
Get started with MLS Listings on-demand training videos. From the Pro homepage, click on the training option at the top of the page. From there, choose from a range of videos covering the fundamentals of Matrix, listing management, and CMAs. Click on the View More option to access even more videos and explore all the resources, tools, and strategies available to you.
And don't forget to click that subscribe button on our MLS Listings YouTube page.